today for the fifth Florence Intermodal Forum on internalizing the external costs of transport. What makes today a very special and relevant debate is the fact that we're listening to fresh findings of the Commission's almost finalized report that is providing an update of the on the external and infrastructure costs of transport, and evaluates to what extent the existing charges and taxes are reflecting these. And of course, this is very relevant in light of the recently published long-term decarbonization strategy of the European Commission, which aims for carbon neutrality across all sectors of the economy by 2050. And transport, as we know, is a particularly challenging sector. So to start with, could you give me your take, your reaction on the main findings of what we just heard this morning, and in particular the proposals for the rail sector?
I mean, in the first place, I have to say that I really appreciated the Commission brought up this study. I mean, we know that they've been working on it since the last 2 years, but it's very good, a very comprehensive one, because it really, in a balanced way, maps the situation with regards to the costs and the internalization of the charges across the mobility sector. If you ask me, what is the rail take-up from that, we are really, we're really happy to find out that the railway costs are pretty much, I would say, covered by the charges that the businesses will have to pay on the side of the marginal cost for the usage of the infrastructure, as well as with regards to the external costs. So the perspective which we are definitely pushing for since ever, I would say. So the user pay and the pull to pay principle is very much entrenched in what we have on the railway side, and the study just confirms that.
Thank you. And another point that was discussed quite heavily this morning was the combination or relationship between pricing or internalization and regulation. And so obviously there were different opinions that were raised, and we slightly touched on the aspect of design. What kind of design is appropriate? Is it punitive or rather incentivizing approach that we should take?
I mean, I would never talk about anything, coming from the regulation as a punitive. That's definitely, and nobody would even expect anything like that. So all what is about to be put in place in the regulation should, of course, incentivize the greening of the transportation and the services that will be better for the society, very clearly. So it's about the incentives. But the whole point about, especially the polluter pay principle, is about incentives. So how to move the whole transportation sector in using the clean tools, the clean instruments, the mobility that will really, be good for the environment, but for society as well. That's for that reason I definitely go in the direction. Let's implement it in the regulation in incentivizing manner. Yes.
Thank you. And on that note, so going to the internalization aspect, some of the speakers today referred to internalization as enabler to sustainable financing, and this very much links to another piece of ongoing work in the Commission that I'm sure you're very much aware of, and that is the taxonomy exercise of the Commission that aims to develop unified criteria and metrics to identify economically sustainable activities, basically, to prevent greenwashing and direct financing where it should really be going. What is your take on how these two should?
I mean, I can even link it, with another subject, which is the green bonds. But certainly this is what we definitely promote and propose to be taken in place, because we need to consider, the instruments, the financing instruments that will be promoting the sustainability. Because obviously, when we talked about the regulation legislation, it's both how to incentivize, but also how to standardize. So that from that perspective, of course, the issues related to the financing and the taxonomy can be only helpful, and we will be the mode that will always be supportive to that. You can imagine why.
Indeed. And one final question, and obviously the European Parliament elections are just around the corner. And what would be your recommendation in terms of policy recommendations or next steps for the Commission in terms of paving the way towards net neutrality in line with the 2050 aspirations of the Commission?
Very clearly what we need and what we expect really from the Commission, but also from the new members of the European Parliament would be setting I would say the targets in the steps. So not only how, or whether we can achieve the target or reach the target of having a carbon neutrality by 2050, but stepwise what needs to be done by 2030, by 2040, and then by 2050. So having really the steps with regards to the carbon reduction from the mobility, so from the transportation in those years. And obviously, again, it's about how to provide the right incentives and what are some restrictions to put in place for the mobility that is not meeting the expectations.
Thank you very much.